Hello, football world, and welcome to the fourth place trophy podcast previewing the 2013-2014 Serie season. I am Forza Juve Piro, and I am joined, as always, by Jujex. Jujex, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome.
Good, and we are joined here with a special guest, Vander Ottef. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm fine, thanks. I'm fine.
Well, glad you can join us here on this podcast. And since the season's already underway, let's not waste any time here. So we're going to start off by previewing Inter. They had an interesting season last year, to say the least. Not up to what they at least hold their standard to. I'm sure. So we're a little bit further down the table than we're accustomed to seeing them. So Joe, what do you think of Inter's season last year?
Well, my opinion is that Inter hasn't really started badly last season because with Stramaccioni we came to the point that we were about to reach Juventus, if you remember, when we had all players at the disposal. But then we started getting some injuries, like the Milito's one was was pretty bad for us.
Yeah, that
because
was
we
not
didn't
good for
have-
you guys.
Yeah, that was very, very, very. I think was the most important one you have. But then after this, we also lost many other players like Palacio, Cassano, Cambiasso, Zanetti. So yeah, these injuries have been a factor, I think, which have somehow affected our performances. Another point, I think, that I would like to underline was that Inter, this is a problem we also have now. We haven't been able during the past few years to valorize our young talents because if you see how Inter is doing. We lost many prospects we had from our academy, and this has been another trouble because we had to play with so many players which were kind of below the expectations, like Pereira or Jonathan, or even we have last year Gargano in the midfield line. Of course, if you play with Gargano, you cannot be that demanding to compete against Juventus that had Vidal, Pirlo.
Right.
So I think that last year Inter was pretty well built. If we see like the 11 starters, but you could easily imagine that if you just lost one important player or two important players, then Inter was about to crumble. So.
Yeah, it was tough when you lose that many players that you guys not only in your starting 11 but are counted upon to be that spark, especially in the attack. With Milito was huge. So yeah, it's going to be hard to make that up. I mean he had only some like 20 starts last year, 19.
Yeah,
and
but
that's low for him.
every time he did and scored, they pretty much won the game. Before we continue, I was just want to say that I'm so excited that we have an actual Italian with us today. It's,
Thank you.
yeah, we've been working on getting Joe on the podcast for a while, so I'm really excited.
Well, yeah, and and things have changed since last year. Some squad changes, but I think the big one that we definitely need to mention is the appointment of Walter Mazzarri as the new manager for the season, and with that comes not only a tactical change, but a change a little bit in mentality as well. So, Jujex, I wanted to see what your thoughts are on the appointment with the new coach from Napoli.
I think that Mazzarri probably could be the best option for Inter. I mean, he took Napoli to the second place last season with 78 points. It was their best season in I don't know how many years, and I think with his experience in Serie and with Inter's need for a coach that has the stability and the quality to bring them from the difficulties to take them away. Sorry, from the difficulties of last season is really important.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that if there's one thing that Mazzarri does very well is focus on the league, on Serie A, and I think that's something that Inter now, especially given their position and what their focus is this year, it'll be a good match when it comes to at least expectations on what needs to be focused on first and foremost. And Joe, so what do you think about that? What do you think of the appointment of Mazzarri as the new Inter coach?
Well, it's hard for me to say whether experience is a real factor when coaching a team, because if you see during the past few years, we can see many coaches who won even though they were pretty young. If you think about Mancini, or maybe also Ancelotti when he first started at Milan, or Guardiola and Mourinho
Or
too.
Conte.
Or Conte too. Yeah. No. I like Conte, of course, because Conte is another great coach, I think. Yeah. So I'm not really sure about the experience as an important factor for a coach. Mazzari is, I think, he's pretty good coach. Even though he's not as good as Capello was, I think he looks a bit like Capello. He's very, very serious. He's very, very well focused on the team. That's an important quality he has, I think. On the other hand, I really feel that Mazzari is not a great coach when it comes to handle young players. Because if you see at Naples, he almost never launched any young talent, even Insigne, which was supposed to be like a prospect for Naples. He almost never played last year, and this is a bit contradictory to me because Inter now is strongly relying on Belfodil and Icardi. They have done a huge investment for them. They paid, I think, Belfodil 10 million plus Cassano plus Silvestre, and Icardi should be around 12 million or 11 million, something like that. And they replaced Cassano. So I mean, Inter is really relying on them at the moment, and we expect them to do great things at Inter. So I really want to see. I'm curious to see whether Mazzari will be able to manage them and to give them the right playing time without putting on them too much pressure.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely something to his detriment, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to Napoli. Is really the fact that he didn't, and you brought up Insigne is a perfect example. He really did not focus on the youth talent, so it will be interesting to see that, especially with the transfer budget that the Inter has at their disposal right now. I mean, they just can't go out and buy a $30 million star that's been established in the league for 10 years. It's just not the point that they're at right now. So to your point, hopefully he has a change of heart when it comes to those youngsters.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point that I was trying to underline too. Actually, Mazzari has also proven not to be this kind of coach. Stamacioni was different in this sense because he trained the academy, so they had kind of
Right.
different approaches. Yeah. That's we will see about how Mazzari will do it because the team now is pretty young. If you think about the defenders, Ranocchia and Jesus or Kovacic, so yeah, let's see whether Mazzari will be the most suitable coach we could have. Yeah.
And it also seems like that the management is focused a lot on bringing youth in because when I'm looking at your transfers, aside from Campagnaro, who is a good and experienced defender, Icardi, as you said, Belfodil, Taider from Bologna, Diego Laxalt, Wallace from Chelsea. There's a good number of young players coming in, so I can definitely see your concern.
Now, do you think with the arrivals that there's anything lacking, Joe? Would you have liked to see? I mean, given that it looks like the most expensive transfer they had this year was Belfodil is at 7.5. Would you have expected someone else to come in than what you guys
No,
ended
no,
up
no.
doing?
No, honestly, I didn't expect any big player to come to Inter because, as we all know now, Italian teams are weaker economically than English ones and Spanish ones. So I couldn't expect Inter to sign Iniesta or Robben because, of course, we don't even play Champions League. So of course, we didn't have money enough. We don't have prestige enough now to sign top players. So I'm happy with this strategy about relying on young talents. And well, there is a point now I should underline regarding this because even though we brought in young talents like Botta or Wallace or others like Tydell, I think we did a big mistake with our academy players who were playing for under 21. But this is something we're going to discuss into the departure sections maybe.
What do you think? What do you think about Campagnaro's capture? Because he was probably one of the, you could even say the best defender in Serie A last season.
No, well, I don't honestly. Campagnaro, I think, is a good defender. He's a good player. I'm not sure about the marks he got last year, so I cannot really give an opinion about this if he was the best one or not. I think he's good.
No, I'm being a little generous here, but he was one of the best
No, I mean,
statistics.
I think, yeah, he's a pretty reliable defender, and you also need experience because if you see last year, John Jesus and Ranocchia, they proved not to be ready yet to lead the defense. So I'm pretty happy to have like a more experienced one next to them.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how Ranocchio does this year because of the growth that he's had from last year. It'll be interesting to see what type of responsibility he puts on himself back there in defense.
And then I have Samuel, but Samuel is not that reliable because he's often injured now, even because he's I think 34 to 35. So you never know if he's available or not.
But between Icardi and Belfodil, who do you think will have a more important role here? Because you seem to be concerned with Mazzari not using youth so much. But, I mean, if you look at Cavani, he was around 22, 23 when Mazzari made him the player that he is. And I think he could definitely do that with Icardi.
Well, the point is that I really feel that Mazzari is not that willing to give them much play time. If you see now there have been some talks lately about Inter signing maybe Borriello or anyway like another striker, because perhaps he doesn't feel totally safe on just having Belfodil and Icardi as subs. So he seems he wants another striker, and in this moment Inter has been playing with just Palacio up front, Alvarez and Palacio, which looks like a bit kind of renounced because we should play with two strikers, I think, especially when you face Genoa or Catania, which are supposed to be weaker than us. And as for the question about Icardi Belfodil, I feel that Icardi might have a brighter future than Belfodil, but this is just like an impression I have because I haven't seen playing that much last year, so I cannot really assess how Belfodil is. But Icardi looks like pretty complete because I saw him being a good scorer, having like pretty good headers, especially against Juventus, if I can say this, yeah. And then he's also fast. I think Icardi can have a brighter future. I'm not sure about Belfodil. I don't even because I just know like them technically, but I don't know really them about the personality or how they are. Some players maybe are good, but then they get lost like Balotelli because they are kinda hotheads, yeah.
Yeah,
There are some hotheads in Italy these days, aren't there?
Yeah. Actually, the point is, Inter is not that good at managing young players. I think that's why, like in Inter, many players don't really behave. So yeah, I want to see how Icardi and Belfodil will do to this regard.
On the departures front, though, you guys sold a couple of promising young defenders in Donati and Calderola to Bundesliga. Cassano is left, obviously. You lost club legend in Dejan Stankovic. You've sent Silvestre to Milan, which is a pretty good deal, I think. And Gargano is back to Napoli, and Skeleto is left on loan. So, what do you think of your departures?
I think the main point you have to underline is that if you look at the transfer departure, this is a clear indication that we didn't do well in the past transfer arrival sections because we just sold Schelotto, Gargano, and Silvestre, plus Cassano, that they all came from the last season. So we have sold four, and well, we are trying to sell Pereira too. So we are about to sell 5 and Kuzmanovic too. So we are about to sell 6 players we just signed last year. So this means that last year we did some big mistakes when signing players. And my main regret about this transfer departure section is about Donati and Calderola because I really feel that these guys had to have a chance because they did pretty well with the under 21 team. And they have never been, they never got a chance to show their talent or show their ability. And of course, I would have preferred to see Donati on the right wing rather than Jonathan or Scaloni.
Exactly.
That was my big surprise was that you guys.
And especially since you guys are after Isla, I don't understand why they didn't give Donati the chance that he deserved. And also, I had a question that I need to ask you, Joe. Is the deal? Does the deal have a buyback clause included in it, like the Real Madrid they had for Danny Carvajal, or have you just sold them, both of them?
You mean deal with Real Madrid? Which deal? Sorry.
Donati and Calderola. Do you have a buyback clause in the deal from the German teams?
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, I think it was just a big mistake to sell them. I think they are just owned by Leverkusen, and I don't know Calderola, but Donati. I think he went to Leverkusen, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was a pretty big mistake. It's kind of contradictory because once you sign Kovacic, you sign Taider, you sign Botta. This sounds like you are trying to relying on young talents. So I don't really understand why you are not relying on talents that we grow in our home, in our own academy. That's strange because these guys have done well, and I just hope that the other guys we have like Duncan or Laxalt or Bardi, they will go in Livorno and Longo too, because I have pretty big expectation on Longo too. He went to Verona, and I really feel he's pretty good striker. He need to of course he need to grow because
Hmm.
he's pretty young, but I also think that he can make it actually. Yeah, and last year he played for Espanyol. He started playing pretty well. He scored some goals, and then unfortunately he got injured because actually we had this kind of I don't know, curse in Inter that all players are like injured. We signed Botta this year, and was after 1 week he got pretty bad injured, and now he's out for 6 months. So I don't know. I don't know if it's about the preparation or just that we are pretty unlucky. But yeah.
Yeah, we were going through similar situations a few years back. Uh, there is a huge change in management come in Inter with the takeover of Eric Thohir, who is the Indonesian tycoon who's buying a huge share in your team. How do you see the management of Inter progressing in the future? Will it be more like Abramovich or would it be more like James Pallotta at Rome?
I think it would be more like the second you mentioned because, well, my opinion is that a tycoon taking over an Italian team at the moment would be totally idiot, in my opinion, in this moment because Italian teams has many depths. No, not really, because I think Italian teams now are facing many depths. Of course, their value is not like nothing like Real Madrid or Manchester United. But the reason why Toir is that interested in Inter, and I would hope that Toir is gonna have a part in the future, in our future, is because I have read a very interesting statistic about Toir, about Indonesia. That in Indonesia, I don't know how it's possible, but seems like there are 11 million Inter supporters. Don't
Wow.
Whoa.
yeah. Indonesian people are around 250 millions, I think, and 11 millions are Inter supporters. I have read this news in many different pages, and that was pretty surprising to me because, of course, I wouldn't expect that. And
Yeah, I know Juve is quite popular on the Far East as well. We have a huge fan
yeah,
base there.
Yeah, it's strange because if you look at China or Japan, there are many more Milan supporters than Inter supporters. But it seems like in Indonesia, Inter is really popular. So the reason why Toei is taking over Inter is because, of course, he has like an internal market that he wants to exploit. That's for sure. That's totally understandable from him. And also he tried to sign Engolan, and the reason why he was trying to sign Engolan is because it was a whole marketing operation, because Engolan is half Indonesian, so of course it was pretty good to sell t-shirts and stuff. So I would like Toir to take over at Inter because now Moratti is not able anymore to support the team financially as he was used to some years ago, and Moratti knows that. He's just a bit concerned about leaving Inter because Inter was his father's team. His father was
Right.
our former chairman, so there is like kind of like an emotional value that he doesn't want to lose. And
Well, yeah, there's that emotional value, and it's also interesting to see that he's taken a more pragmatic approach than Berlusconi with Milan. At least he's bringing in that outside investor to help the team before it gets bad. Because I think if he would have waited a couple more years, Inter might not have been in a as viable situation.
yeah, actually, yeah. The point about this, the many Italian, many Interistas now are fearing about the situation because we all don't want Moratti to leave because Moratti has been kind of very generous chairman at Inter. Because if you see how many signings he brought in, you can just say congratulations because he brought many players like Ronaldo.
All those Argentinians.
Yeah, but many were good because if you think about, Zanetti was his first signing, and Zanetti
Yeah.
became Zanetti. Do you know why Moratti signed Zanetti? That's pretty funny if you wanna know.
No.
Yeah,
Tell
no?
us.
What is it?
You don't know the story about Zanetti?
No, we don't.
Oh,
We don't.
okay, the story about Zanetti is that Moratti was about to sign another player from the same team. He was watching like with his pretty young son a match at home about this player. I don't know who this guy was, and his young son, that was around maybe 6 years old at the time, say, "No, no, father, I want this player, I want the number 4." And the number 4 was Zanetti. And once he, okay, I'm gonna buy it for you. I'm gonna buy him for you.
Smart kid, gotta say.
Yeah. And Zanetti became Zanetti after, so that was like one of the best signings. Then he spent a lot of money for other players, and not everyone turned out as good as we hoped.
Yeah, Crespo, Vieri, a lot of big signings. I definitely remember.
Ronaldo, Crespo, Vieri.
But with Eric Toher coming in, do you expect him to fund your new stadium, because that is one of the most important topics that they were discussing?
Well, especially in Italy right now, it's the new stadium is the only way that clubs are going to be financially viable here in the future. So I think that is the big question with Tohir's coming in.
Yeah, one important point to understand is if I don't really know how worth is the investment for a new stadium. I just know that one of the main expenses we have now at the moment is because our stadium is owned by the how do you say in English, by the government. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not the government, but the municipality, perhaps, of Milan.
I think it is by the city, and I think that actually there might be some partial ownership by the Olympic Committee, because I think that's an old Olympic stadium.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to pay taxes on it. You have to pay the whole rent, which is pretty expensive. This kind of pretty huge expense we have at the moment.
So what you're trying to say is that are you trying to buy San Siro, or
No, that's impossible, because since we share with Milan, that's going to be a trouble to buy.
Yeah.
It's kind of impossible.
I think San Siro is going to be Milan's.
Yeah. Torino wanna build a new stadium at the moment, and I think Moratti really wants Torino to do this, and that's a point. That's why maybe they haven't nailed the deal yet, because Moratti wanna make sure that Torino is going to do what he promised to do. So
right.
I really hope that that this can happen, even because I don't like to share anything with Milan.
This is a true story.
Yeah. And actually, the same thing that may happen in Madrid with Atletico or Madrid. I think it's fair that each team has his own stadium. So
yeah, I mean we all see how that works out with the Capitol Stadium in Rome. It's an interesting venue to be at at least.
Yeah, and I think another point that you asked me before was about if Torino is going to be more like an Abramovich or a James Pallotta, right? That was your main question about Torino, right?
Yes.
Yeah, in my opinion, he is not willing to spend much on Inter. He's not willing to invest much. So we'll say he's closer to James Pallotta in this sense. I don't think he's aiming to get very, very important players. That's my impression at the moment. Obviously I don't know Torino pretty well, so I cannot really have a clear opinion about him. But that's my feeling, honestly, that he just wanted to. He will, of course, bring some resources. But I don't think he will be anything like PSG or Chelsea, or no, I don't feel that, to be honest.
Right. Well, I guess the hope is that there's not an exodus of what talent you do have just to make the business side of the club look better. I guess that was kind of the root of the question between Abramovich and Pallotta. Abramovich doesn't care really what the business looks like. He's going to spend money on players.
Yeah, we still have to wait for the details of the sale.
But honestly, to be honest, I don't really want Torino to be like Abramovich. I mean, of course, you're always excited when your team gets some very important players, like Abramovich did with Torres, Drogba, and many others. But once you see that your president spends 57 million for a player, you really wonder what's the purpose, in my opinion. Because if you see some other teams like Barcelona, they have spent some money on some players, but they also created their own players from the academy, and that's what I would like to see in Inter, a larger project, not just buying players, but also thinking about the academy, thinking about how to raise some youngsters. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and that kind of brings up a question we kind of touched on a little bit earlier when we were talking about Mazzarri. Is coming in, where Inter's not been landing any, huge signings. I think quality players have still been there, like the Donati. And with Mazzarri's typical 3-5-2 formation, I know he hasn't been employing that in the last few matches. What do you think new players will be coming in, or what can you expect from Mazzarri trying to tailor the whole system, including the youth academy, so that he can utilize the players that he has versus trying to go buy maybe veterans that he thinks he needs.
I don't know. Looks like he's now more reliant on veterans in the sense that if you look at the current formation we have, Mazzarri has just fielded the Campagnaro. He's the only new signings that we have at the moment, but all the other players come from the last season, so he doesn't want to change much, straight away. Maybe he's waiting for Taider to better get introduced to the team and other players. Maybe he's just thinking about Icardi and Belfodil in the future, not really now. And yeah, the 3-5-2 formation, I don't really know if this the only formation that Mazzarri has in mind, because I even remember him playing with the 3 strikers, I think, at Naples last season.
Yeah, he played it at times. I guess it depended on the side that he would play. Like when he was playing Juve, it was the 3-5-2 because he was launching the counterattacks, and that's kind of the style that he was playing. And so it's whether or not the squad that he has at his disposal can really utilize that type of formation.
Yeah, sometimes the formation really depends on the players you have. So sometimes you just have to adapt your formation according to your players, and that's what Mourinho did at Inter. I hope Mazzarri will do the same, because the only player you have which can somehow resemble Cavani is Milito, but not even much, because Milito is not really. I mean, Cavani is really runs a lot for the team. He defends too. Milito is more like a striker, just like I don't know how to say in English, but prima punta. He's more like goal oriented than Cavani. Cavani scores many goals, but he also helps in defense, and he's kind of different compared with Milito. So if you don't have a player like this, things get a bit harder. And also we need to assess one very important point, because Mazzarri last year had Hamsik. This year,
right.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenge he has is about Guarin. I still haven't understood whether Guarin is a good player or not, because at first I got very, very excited about him. He started playing very, very well, but during the second part of the season, I was so nervous. I was so disappointed about his performances, because he looked like he got a bit presumptuous when he was playing. That he thought he was kind of I don't know, top player that he's not.
You are mentioning Guarin, but wouldn't Kovacic be the player that is going to have the Hamsik role in your team, because he's a creative attacking midfielder, and Guarin, even though he's pretty good going forward, he could play a more central role, can he?
I think the opposite, to be honest, because I feel Guarin be more hectic than Kovacic. Kovacic, I think, he's the kind of player that he always knows where to pass the ball, to whom to pass the ball. So I see him, Kovacic holding, in a more central position. I would prefer to see, to see Kovacic as a playmaker, and maybe Guarin, in the same position, maybe of Vidal or Boateng, that, he can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would prefer to see this kind of formation at Inter, but yeah, we'll see.
So, what do you think is the best formation at the moment with the players that you have?
Well, I will start with, of course, Andanovic. Then it's hard
That
to
goes
say.
without saying.
that was easy. That was an easy guess. But then I would maybe, I don't know, feel on the right side. I would feel. Well, I'm a fan of 4-4-2, to be honest. But if I think about Mazzarri, I have to think about the 3-5-2, perhaps. So I would say Ranocchia, Samuel, Juan Jesus. Now Samuel is out, but he will be back. Then I would like to see on the right side. I think the best player we have at the moment is Zanetti, even though he's injured. Because if you think about the others, well, luckily you got rid of Schelotto.
When will he be coming back?
I'm not sure. I think it will take still 2-3 months, something like this, because the injury was pretty bad. So
that's exactly why I was so surprised that you guys sold Donati. With Zanetti, his age and injury, it's just baffling to see Inter selling him.
Yeah. You're totally right, actually. The point are two, mainly. The first one, in my opinion, was that Inter, at a certain point, was pretty sure that we were going to sign Isla. I don't know why really the deal didn't come through in the end, but Inter was pretty confident about this deal some time ago. So that's
the reason that we didn't sell Isla to you guys was that Marotta, we're not buying the left wing back that Conte was asking for, and Conte wanted to make sure that he brings somebody in before we sell Isla to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Well, I mean,
And we still haven't brought anybody in, so he had a point.
my big regret, and this is something I said even 2 years ago. If you check like your 42 wall, you're gonna see that I really hope that sometime ago Inter could sign Quadrado from Fiorentina. That he's
Oh
a
yeah.
good player, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
And we didn't. The cost was just 10 million. He preferred to sign Pereira for 12, so I was pretty disappointed about this move. But yeah, now the point is that we didn't have any other choice after that because we just talked about another player. Because of course we don't want to play I think the whole season with Jonathan, and we saw that a good option was to sign Wallace. But then again, your question is pretty I think like is a very good question because. I still think that Donati needed a chance. Donati really deserved to have a chance to show his talent, and we didn't give it to him. So, yeah.
Well, with all the players going out, I mean, what are your expectations for Inter this year?
Well, players going out, actually, many of them, I've said before, are players that we signed last year, because last year I really did many mistakes about the transfer arrivals. So if you see about Kuzmanovic, Silvestre, Gargano, I don't regret any of this departure. The only one I can regret...
Well, I guess it's more a question of with the new manager, with the players that you have that have come in and have gone out, what are your expectations for Inter this year, whether it be a league position or qualification?
No, I think no one is expecting Inter to be to win the league or to come second because you have some teams which look pretty which look better at the moment like Juventus or Fiorentina or Napoli, and I would say Milan too because Milan generally start pretty slowly but then they start doing better. So I think we have at least 3 or 4 teams which look kind of better at the moment. So I think unfortunately this is going to be kind of. I don't know, a pretty disappointing season if we think to get a higher position than the third, or fourth, or fifth, in my opinion. So I would expect Inter to come to the Europe League this season, and I would be surprised if we do better than this, honestly.
Yeah, I'd be hoping for Inter to get a Europa League spot, not just because of all the teams reinforcing this offseason. I think even that is going to be tough for Inter. We'll see how the season progresses. You have less to deal with and maybe some of the other squads, so you definitely can at least hopefully rest and minimize those injuries that you do have. But I would hope that Inter can be up there in the number 4 spot, fighting for number 3. But I'm a Juventino, so as long as you're not number 1 and we are, I'm happy.
So you predict that Inter's gonna finish 4th, maybe, Evan?
I'm gonna pick 4th. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I predicted that Roma was gonna come 3rd, but now I'm gonna have to go back on my word, and they're gonna be I don't know where, but Inter I think they're gonna finish 5th this season. I'm gonna say 5th. I think the top 4, the Juve, Milan, Napoli, Fiorentina, those top 4 places, I think they are given.
Yeah, but don't underestimate Fiorentina because they're pretty good this season, I think.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're going to move on to Napoli and kind of give them a look. A lot of things have changed, a lot, including the money has changed a lot since last season. They had a good year as Jujex had mentioned. They finished second, just right behind Juve. And now with the changing of the guards, we're going to talk about the manager that was brought in, Rafa Benitez. A lot of new faces coming in, Cavani going out. But wanted to see what you thought of Napoli seasons last year, Jujex.
It was their best season, as I said. They were excellent. The duo of Edinson Cavani and Marek Hamsik, they were pretty much the most impressive in their position. Cavani scored almost 30 goals, 29 goals, I believe. And they were pretty much the only team that were challenging us for the title. And right before the Napoli game, which we draw 1-1, they were pretty much in it. But after that, the distance, the gap became bigger and we won the league. But they had an excellent season last year.
What do you think, Joe?
Well, I think this season they were pretty surprising because they did pretty well, and they especially it's pretty hard to play in Naples for another team because the stadium is pretty lively, so it's pretty hard to. No, I don't know how to say this. The stadium is very very.
No, you said it perfectly, Joe. Lively.
Lively is the right word. Not just the stadium, the roads everywhere.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
now the point will be to see whether they will they will do the same this season because they have signed many players, but they also lost Cavani. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the first question has to go, just like we talked about Mazzarri is kind of the first part with Inter, is Rafa coming in? It's definitely a big change, especially with the mentality. You know, Rafa's definitely a not only a successful coach in what he's done, he's successful in Europe, which I think is what a lot of Neapolitans are hoping to see. How do you feel about the new management with Rafa kind of taking charge, Joe?
Yeah, honestly, I always liked Benitez because even though he didn't really do well at Inter, he was also unlucky, but he proved to be pretty good at Liverpool because he reached the semi-final or final of Champions League. I can't remember now, and he wasn't expected to come that far away in the competition. So I think he's pretty good. He's pretty good at motivating players. I think he knows a lot about soccer. That's you can see like his teams they generally play pretty good soccer. They're very creative. So I think he's pretty different from Mazzari. Mazzari is more like kinda general. He's very very serious about his job. Benitez perhaps is more gives more space to technique or to or to like skilled players.
Yeah, and for me, I think it will be interesting mainly because expectations are going to change a little bit. He's a successful coach. He definitely knows how to handle more star talent. I don't know if Mazzarri would have been the best with some of the big names that De Laurentiis has brought in this year. But one thing for me that's interesting because I've been watching them is that his style is drastically different than what Napoli has been used to playing, and that has typically been a more counterattack, sitting back a little bit and then springing forward. Again, you have the Cavani, you have the Hamšík that are just extremely fast bursts, speeds up the pitch, and he brings a little bit more of an English feel than a strictly Italian way of playing. At least that's what I've seen so far from him this season. So the question that comes up would be, who do you think would have been or is a better fit for Napoli? Obviously, Mazzarri is now at Inter, Benitez is now at Napoli, but which would you prefer, Jujax, if you could choose between Rafa and Mazzarri?
Yeah, exactly. With the players that they've brought in, I think Benitez would be the best choice. I mean, if you look at the amount of importance that is put on wing play this time around, he really has the right player the right coach. Napoli has brought in the right coach and the right players for that style. I mean, we already mentioned that Insigne wasn't getting that much playing time, and in Mazzari's system, he wasn't really fitting in. But Rafa seems to have a lot of faith in him, and from what we've seen from Napoli already, everything seems to be clicking. So it seems like a very good idea.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely been clicking. I think the expectations for them, now that they've spent almost 120 million, is that Europe is almost a must. So it's going to be interesting to see how he ends up balancing the squad. That was something that Mazzarri was definitely not necessarily keen on doing. He wanted to mainly focus on the Serie A. So I'll be interested to see even though they've brought in and added talent to the starting 11, given what their bench looks like, it'll be interesting to see how that he manages that with being on multiple fronts throughout the year.
I mean, I understand you say that about Mazzarri, but when they were in the Champions League, they were really good in Champions League. I think it's understandable that Italian teams that they don't put too much in the Europa League, but he did a good job in Champions League. But obviously Rafa Benitez, with the experience he has, he's won one, I think. So I think they can go a lot further this season.
Absolutely. Well, and just kind of getting to to the departures, I mean, really, not many departures have kind of transpired. It's really only Campagnata and De Sanctis, although they're definitely notable departures. Joe, what do you think of losing? Well, you gaining, but Napoli losing Campagnata and De Sanctis.
Well, it's not that big gain actually. He's a good defender, but he's a 33 years old defender. So I don't think. Last year he didn't. He hasn't played during the past few games. I think Campagnaro. I think maybe just because like like the Napoli needs to rejuvenate too. So maybe they just brought in someone younger. And well, De Santis, I think he was a good goalkeeper, but I don't know who is the goalkeeper now at Napoli. Who is it?
They have Pepe Reina on loan.
I didn't know that. Pepe Reina, okay, yeah. Pepe Reina, of course, maybe came also because he played with Benitez formerly. That's why perhaps Benitez wanted him, and he's pretty experienced. So I would feel safer if I were a Napoli supporter with Reina than De Sanctis.
Really? Because Reina last season with Liverpool, he had some pretty dangerous moments.
Well, I don't really know how Reina performed last year, but maybe I'm talking like this because I really don't like De Sanctis. I don't know if the story about De Sanctis, that he was involved in kind of match fixing. Do you know this?
Was this during the Calciopoli?
No. In the match fixing, that was straight after that. There had been a match which was Napoli against Lecce.
Oh,
Yes.
Exactly. And I mean, like he said that wasn't true, but I mean, there is a video testifying that. So I really don't like the person, and I think the player has been always a bit overrated because he's not a bad goalkeeper, but he has never been a special one like many other Italian goalkeepers we had. If you think about our tradition,
yeah, I definitely understand.
Peruzzi, Zenga, Buffon, Toldo. I mean, the subject has
Zoff.
You remember? Do you remember Zoff, Evan?
Hey, I'm still gonna give a shout out to my boy. There we go.
Yeah, the Santis has nothing to share with them, but yeah, he's okay.
Their first choice was Julio Cesar, but they couldn't agree on his salary. And Reina getting Reina on loan definitely is a good deal. But the important departure, the sale of the year in Serie, it was Edinson Cavani sale to PSG for a record 64 million euros, which makes him the 5th highest of all time. So, what do you guys think of that?
Well, I personally think it's the right move for Napoli. I mean, the fact that they had a club willing to spend that much, and granted, I think that out of all the strikers, I really like Cavani. Like Joe had mentioned, he's that box-to-box type of striker. He'll come back and help in defense, and he just has an engine on him. And he's big, he's strong, he's got a cannon of a foot, and he's definitely technically gifted. But if you can get 64 million, I mean, we'll get into what they kind of got for that, but I think it was a smart move by them because I don't know, even if he had another year like he had this past year, I don't know if you get someone to bite off on 64 million personally. What do you think, Joe?
I totally agree. The point is, objectively, at the moment, Italian teams cannot say no to this kind of offer because 64 millions are a lot of money if you think about it. And we're not that rich at the moment, so it's not really, common for us to get this kind of offers. It was maybe some years ago with Shevchenko, Kaká, but now we don't have many stars. So 64 millions, it was a pretty smart move. I think the same as you guys. So it was kind of like necessary. It wasn't good or bad. I think it was necessary. So once you get this kind of money, the best thing you can do is just think about how to invest this money. And I think Napoli did fairly well because actually they bought. Well, we're gonna talk about later about this.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
Yeah, sure.
But it was a good thing that they hold on for that 64.5 million because teams, Real and Man City, they tried to get him for less, but it worked out well for them. I mean, if you look at the transfers that they brought in, the notice of the important one here is Higuain from Real for 37 million plus 3 in bonuses, which is a little high when we'll get to it. But they've also brought in Raul Albiol and Jose Callejon for 12 and 10. Dries Mertens from PSV, I think, for around 10. Armero on a co-ownership deal. Reina, as we mentioned, and it's been pretty good. What do you guys think of Higuain replacing Cavani? I am going to start with you, Joe.
Well, I'm gonna say that I prefer Cavani better than Higuain. To be honest, I think Higuain is a very reliable striker. I like this guy, to be honest, because he's deadly. He scored many goals even with Real Madrid. Even though I always felt that Milito, not because he's an Inter player, but I feel Milito is somehow better. And I'm making this comparison because if you remember, Maradona chose
Higuain over
Higuain.
Milito.
Yeah, he chose Higuain over Milito. So I think he maybe has been somehow overrated, but he still is good because he played a long time for Real Madrid. He scored many. He's a more a typical striker. He's not like Cavani who really helps in defense. And Cavani is very very complete. He scores in any way.
But Cavani is pretty unique. I mean, if you look at other top strikers like Falcao and even Robin van Persie, guys like that, they don't track back as much as he does. I mean, his energy is just out of this world.
Yeah, and I think Higuain is still going to be a good pickup given the way the setup is. I think he's not going to be required to track back. I think that is something that Mazzarri, not only was it something that he could rely on in Cavani because that was part of his inherent characteristic, but I don't think Benitez would even if he had Cavani would even necessarily want him dropping back. I think with him, Callejon should start melding into the system well. I think Martens is a good pickup. Armero as kind of the guy coming in off the bench. Albiol is a good pickup. I think they got a lot of good value for that Cavani money. So I think, kind of extending on what Joe said, I think it was not only necessary, but it was something that they could really build, especially for Benitez. I think he could build the squad that he wanted instead of just taking over the squad that Mazzarri was leaving behind. So I think it was a good move all the way around because they got good players in the end.
I have to disagree a little here because I think they overpaid for some of them. I mean, if you look at Raul Albiol, they bought him for 12 million, and he was a player that he barely got any playing time in Real. He wasn't by any stretch of the imagination impressive when played for Real. Callejon's fee is understandable, and he seems to be playing well for Napoli, but the salaries that they gave him is 3 million net, which is around the same that they're giving to Mark Hamsik. So I still believe that they overpaid for some of these players.
I may understand this point actually, but what I think about Real Madrid is that sometimes they put really much pressure on some players, and that's why maybe they underestimate some players. Because if you see about the past, you see that Real Madrid never gave space to players like Cambiaso or Robben or Sneijder, and once they sold them, they turned out to be pretty good. So I don't think it's necessarily a question of being good or bad. Maybe Albiol didn't play much, but still he was paid 2 years before, perhaps 25, I think. So he has proven before to be good, I think. So.
All right, maybe you're right. Maybe we'll see about that.
I think the salary question is valid. Whether the transfer fees were too big or not, I think is up for debate. But I think you have to think that now that money's gone, where are they going to, unless they are constantly in Champions League and making late runs, how are they going to pay for these guys on a salary basis? So I think Cinda does bring up a good point when it comes to they overpaid. I think it's arguable whether or not, the Higuain's transfer fee, that's probably a little bit high. In terms of what his true value is, whether it be on the stat sheet or within the squad. But the salaries are astronomical. So I guess I do agree when it comes to overpaying for their salaries. I think it's, a coin toss whether or not it was, a lavish spending for their transfer fees. But their salaries are something that they can't sustain unless they're constantly in Europe and they're making more and more money, and that also goes in line with if they need to get their own stadium. They need to buy their own stadium. They need to own their own stadium to sustain a club with that type of payroll.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, the Napoli ownership is one of the richest in Italy. But your point is right because now they are facing many high salaries. So that's true. They really need to play in European competitions. Yeah, I think the point about Higuain is also about that they got 64 million for Cavani and they had to buy first rate striker. So once they saw the ones who were available on the market, they saw that there weren't many options available for them. So Higuain was one of them, and that's why maybe they got him because Falcao was hard to get because of the price tag or other problems. Yeah.
What one concern that I have is with all these new players coming in, will they still put the focus on developing youngsters? Especially Insigne is the big important young player that they have.
Well, looks like Insigne will play as a sub this season too, because once you have Callejon, Amsic, which is kind of irreplaceable, and Higuain, seems there is no space for Insigne to start to play as a starter, so he can just start from the bench, and maybe he gonna have some play time in Italian Cup or somewhere else. Maybe he's good. He can be well, let's say promoted to the first team, but. I don't think the intention of Benitez now is to really rely on him.
Well, and my hope is that he gets tons and tons of playing time because I really, really like him. I think Higuain's going to be the out and out number one go to striker. I'm not sure about Callejon. I think that is where Insigne can get his playing time in again, especially because they will be in Champions League, they will be in Copa. I think splitting time with Callejon between all of those different fronts, I think he will get some starting time. It's whether or not he has to fight it out with, some of the other strikers that they do have that they've already had that aren't necessarily new signings. But I'm very hopeful because I want to see him also play in Brazil next summer. So I'm hopeful he gets that.
I think for now his direct competition is Mertens, who is new to the league. He had around 16, 17 goals for PSV, so he's a pretty good player. But if you look at the team now, they're playing with 4-3-3, and Higuain is pretty much the center forward, so it leaves the right wing and the left wing position up for grabs.
Sure.
I mean, you have Callejon, who's pretty much used on the right side if you look at the first Napoli games of this season, so Insigne is more of a left winger. So it leaves Insigne, maybe Pandev, which I'm not sure if
I think Panda's coming off the bench for sure.
Yeah, he's going to probably be the backup to Higuain. So it's Mertens versus Insigne. But Rafa's promised everybody that Insigne is one of my key players this season. We have to wait and see how he's going to develop.
Yeah, and again, I think it goes back to really what Champions League is going to end up unfolding, because I think not only is that where De Laurentiis' expectations are. I mean, yes, they want to unseat Juve with the Serie title, but I think he wants to make a splash in the Champions League. So I think that expectations aside, I think that he's going to go with the best starting and creative attacking front, and I have to believe that Insigne is part of that. And to your point, Senna, it's because Mertens is not comfortable, or at least used to yet, the Italian games.
Yeah, and we see that so many players coming into Italy, especially attackers and wingers, they struggle a lot in their first season in Serie A to get adapted to the league.
Agreed.
Yeah. It's also depend on the experience, because you see other strikers like Klose or these kind of players who are used to play like in several teams. Maybe they already know how to play because they have been around for long. So yeah, it depends on the player. But a player like Mertens, maybe he comes from a very, very different football. He might have some problems at the beginning, perhaps.
Well, what do we all expect from Napoli this year for at least whether it be their positioning or how far do you think they'll go in Champions League this year? Joe, throw it out to you.
Well, my opinion is that Napoli will hold the third position this year, if I can say this, because I see Juventus and Fiorentina first.
You and Fiorentina, that's
a bold position, Joe.
Sorry?
That's a bold pick to have Fiorentina there above Napoli.
Yeah, my opinion.
But coming from an Inter fan, I can definitely understand why Milan is not in the top three.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my opinion. I really feel Fiorentina is pretty well built this year. That's why I think that Fiorentina can do somehow better than them. Yeah, that's just my guess. I don't know why.
What about you, Senna? What do you think?
I agree with Joe that Napoli is going to finish third, especially with the focus on Champions League. I mean, if you look at their group, They say it's the group of death, but I think it's the group of excitement because none of those. Well, Dortmund, I guess, aside from Dortmund, the other three teams aren't really contenders for the Champions League, but they are all at the same level. They have Arsenal, Dortmund, Olympique Marseille, and Napoli, and I think they're gonna come out of their group first, if maybe second. I'm pretty sure Arsenal is gonna drop out. Sorry, Arsenal fans. Uh, and in the league, with the focus on Champions League, I think they're gonna finish third.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with that. I don't think they're gonna finish third. I'm gonna go against you, Joe. I'm gonna put Milan there in second. I just think that I'm excited about the El Shaarawy and Balotelli up front. And if they can at least get off to a better start than they did the year before, I mean, they didn't lose the second half of the season following the winter break, so I have to assume that they're going to put on a show this year now that they've had Balotelli the whole year. So I'm going to go with Napoli is going to be in the third spot, and I am same with you, Sina. I think they're going to get out of the group stages. I think they'll. I mean, you never know, but I don't know if they'll be making a deep run in the Champions League.
It depends on luck of the draw. So
yeah,
how far they can go. We've
true.
Experienced that last season.
Yeah, we definitely experienced that. Well, Joe, want to really appreciate you coming and joining us today and talking a little Serie A football for next year, and really appreciate you coming out and being on the podcast. Hopefully we can have you back.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you, guys.
Well, that is it for the Serie A preview on fourth place trophy of Inter and Napoli. Hope everyone checks us out for any of the other parts of the Serie A preview, and have a couple more coming up. So hopefully you guys all stay tuned, and thanks so much for listening.